parts of Europe to increase social solidarity amongst the regions of Europe and, not at least, to reinforce the commitment of the European project. However, given the recent lack of appreciation in countries such as Wales and Hungary, the EU should also concern itself with the revitalization of local communities and give a voice to bottom-up organizations that can decide for themselves what would be useful in their context under current conditions. After this long introduction, there are two elements which are relevant to our discussion here, I think. One is the involvement of local and regional stakeholders. So, are you satisfied with the degree of involvement of local and regional stakeholders in the establishment of EU social policies?
Comme je l'ai déjà dit, d'abord, je ne suis pas satisfait du niveau d'activité que l'Union européenne fait.
As I have already said, I'm not satisfied with the level of activity that the EU is doing in the social field. I must also say that the involvement of local and regional authorities and organized civil society, particularly NGOs, and all the initiatives that are developing in a spectacular way these days is impressive. This participation is not yet entirely satisfactory. A lot is being done and there is real progress, but we will still need to bring much closer to what is being done to reality. That is a complicated problem that I encountered during the decades when I was in government functions and managed many European projects. Every time we promised administrative simplification, but every time we ended up creating more bureaucratic complications, and I still see everywhere in Europe situations where people pull their hair out because there are all kinds of controls, studies to be done, heavy mechanisms to be implemented to formulate a project. Discourages many people. It is not easy to solve this. We need rules, but we must simplify them and adapt them to regional situations, to the places we are and to the performance of the past.
Il faut davantage de proximité et aussi de débureaucratisation.
The second one concerns the issue of brain drain. Indeed, the issue of brain drain from regions located in the Eastern and Southern European member states is one of the problems that hinder convergence, if you want, between different parts of European Union. So what policies can be enacted to counter the problem of brain drain at the EU, national, and most of all at the regional level?
Et même mondial, si vous voulez compléter le tableau.
Moreover, even worldwide, if you want to complete the picture. We live in a very particular demographic situation in Europe, which is characterized mainly by a labor shortage, at least for some time to come. What I said earlier about artificial intelligence will, in my opinion, in a few decades, put things a little into perspective. In any case, today, we have a dramatic shortage of workforce in the high-performance regions. There are people from other European regions who are not doing so well, and people who move from other continents, such as Africa and Asia. These people come to us, and it solves a problem here, but it creates a big problem elsewhere. I believe that mobility must be maintained. It is a positive thing, but we must always keep measures in place. There can be no question of emptying entire countries like it is almost happening in Romania and Bulgaria. These countries are getting emptied of their living strength and thus accentuating the real regional distensions. Even if money earned here returns to national circuits, it is difficult to measure. The best way is to do everything necessary through an active cohesion policy to ensure that development is achieved everywhere. We must not come up with solutions that solve today's problem by creating problems elsewhere for tomorrow. The same applies to something even more important for our relations with the African continent. If we are not careful, we will have the same phenomenon in these countries, and it is therefore not enough to contribute to the training of the African population at home. We must also create economic activities there. Unfortunately, it is not always straightforward, and even less when we look at the rather particular nature of the regimes in place. Mobility can be useful. It is enriching. However, in any case, it must not go beyond a certain level, and in any case, it must not empty certain countries of their substance.
In October 2018, the Committee of the Regions adopted an opinion on the establishment of a European Labour Authority, the ELA, and among the key points of the opinion your organization, your institution drafted, the committee underlines that the regional and local level is directly affected by irregularities in matters of cross-border labor mobility, that it has the closest contact with the public and thus with job seekers and employers, and that labor market mobility is to a considerable extent arranged and arrangeable along regional lines. Can you explain to us what kind of irregularities linked to cross-border labor mobility are affecting regions the most? And how can the establishment of the ELA solve them?
Oui, donc là, il faut évidemment discuter surtout avec les experts, et moi je ne suis pas
I'm not an expert in this field, but I would like to say that there are other more constructive reasons to plead in favor of a European Labour Authority, and there are also many arguments for pleading for more harmonizations and solidarity, such as for an employment insurance as it is discussed. There are particularly many abuses because everything remains national, and it is easier to make abuses in a system like this than if there were an existent authority to control that. We must go after abuses because they create inequalities and they are very unfavorable to those who behave correctly. Abuses exist in the legal and political system. We didn't tie it up well from the beginning, but it is difficult to change because there are many areas in there where you need unanimity, and someone will always have a good reason to disagree. What is happening in the field of road transport is still an unbearable scandal today. It is unbelievable the condition on the borderline of slavery existing today, and Europe has still not been able to resolve this correctly. With this infamous way of optimizing locations and inventing ways of escaping the wage costs of the country where the activity is finally carried out, even today, thanks to European mechanisms, we still have this kind of situation, and it is very urgent that we act. Progress is being made very slowly. We have seen recently in the European Parliament how difficult it has been, but here a European Labour Authority can be instrumental. I believe that competition that consists in making more profits by pushing compensation standards, occupational safety standards, and social standards down must be killed. Europe must not push down. Europe must allow everyone who works from morning to night to earn a decent living from them, and at least for a part of their family. It is Europe's mission to realize that, and not only to imagine tricks and tips to maximize huge financial profits in a few places.
Et c'est ça l'objectif de l'Europe, et pas imaginer des ficelles et des tuyaux pour maximiser à quelques endroits des profits financiers colossaux.
Andrew Watt, another scholar who contributed to our Eurovision special issue on the establishment of a European Social Union, wrote that as far as the redistribution of policies are concerned, the EU budget is an obvious place to start with. On the expenditure side, space for spending, even without greater resources, could be found by reducing and better targeting agricultural-related spending. Greater resources could then be devoted to social spending with a clearer European rationale, such as support for lagging regions or boosting the sensible but underfunded European Globalization Adjustment Fund. How much do you agree with Watt's statement? Do you think that there is an issue of rationalization of EU funds?
Oui.
There is much to rationalize and improve. There is also this question to ask. Don't we have to redistribute priorities a little bit through the funds? It's not by stealing a little money from the agricultural policy that we are going to save social policies, and in any case, if we play that game, we are all going to shoot ourselves in the foot. It is necessary to proceed in stages. One thing is to agree to give once and for all the necessary funds to a project as ambitious as the European Social Union. More generally, the European project can become more ambitious until it operates with 1% of European GDP, the equivalent of 1 cup of coffee per European citizen per day. That's ridiculous. Yet it will not change as long as we do not really manage to provide the EU with some own resources. We have to get out of this story of a net contributor and a net beneficiary. So this fight must continue and must never be abandoned. However, in reality, for example, for the MFF, which will start if everything goes well in 2021, you don't have to be an illusionist either. Even the 1.3% of European GDP that Parliament strongly demands will not simply be achieved. Success can be achieved on new recipes, especially for new policies. We should go all out on the real abuses that are the billions of euros that get lost in the VAT carousel, for example. Then we also have to be very objective and put each item of the European budget on the table to see if we have to continue as we have done now. Are there any changes to be made? Should we shift money from one side to the other? There will be a time in this decision when the unanimity of the Council is required, and depending for far too much on unanimity is a fundamental flaw in today's European Constitution. However, there must be guidelines to ensure that we no longer always have the same amount of money as before. Not everyone can enter this debate saying, I want to keep at least what I already have. No, you have to be flexible and see what the real problems are. Some regions are doing better today that do not necessarily have the legitimacy to ask for the same thing when we should be using that money to do something else. It is necessary, but it's tough, to manage a budget in a territorial entity or even in a state. I spent 15 years as finance minister in my region, and when we start distributing money, that is the real moment of truth.
C'est ça le vrai moment de vérité quand on commence à distribuer l'argent.
Mr. Lambertz, thank you very much for coming in today. And that's it for today's show. You can find many other contents about the ideas, discourse and policies of social Europe on New Vision's website at www.uvisions.eu. Until next time, goodbye.